Are you acting from your higher self or are you acting from your lower self? That's a question that comes up quite frequently in a lot of different ways of thinking about things, different belief systems. But higher self is a pretty common term, and you've probably heard of a lot of different terms about acting from your higher self versus, your God self versus your lower self, your highest aspects. But it can be quite confusing to know whether you're acting from that state of higher self versus from those lower aspects of the ego self. We're going to break all of this down in today's video in a way that we're going to make it very, very simple and easy for you to know whether you're acting from your highest self version or more from the ego self. But we're going to break it down in such a way that you can really feel good about everything that you're doing and some ways to really know if you're in that alignment and how to decipher that. My name is Derek Ivy. I'm a board certified clinical hypnotherapist, researcher, and intuitive. Thank you so much for being here. I help people bust through what's holding them back in life so they can love their themselves and their lives more and more every single day. So thank you so much for being here. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share with a friend that would also benefit from this information. And so let's get right into this. What is the higher self? The or you've also maybe heard it been called the authentic self or the God self. What is the higher self? In a lot of different belief systems, our higher self it's really the wisest part of our being. It is a calm, loving, spiritual guide that brings all of our soul's highest positive characteristics and embodies our soul's highest spiritual characteristics, positive characteristics. Um, and it also calls our lower nature into question to bring us to a place where we're really the best that we can possibly be. In a lot of my sessions, the way that I describe the higher self is it's this part of us that has been with us since before we were a baby in this life, will be here with us, kind of guiding us. So it's our highest level of ideals, right? It's our guidance system to guide us to what our soul actually was meant to fully express without the trauma, without the limiting beliefs. And when we live in alignment with this inner wisdom of the higher self, we really do become our best version, the best possible version of ourselves. Our higher self is always knows deep down our true purpose in life and encompasses all of these potentials that we have to live the most fulfilling life possible. So it's really a friend in helping us in personal growth and self-awareness. So we're going to get into this. How do we know when we're acting out of the ego? So our ego self is, we can think about the definition of ego. Ego is a coping mechanism that we all really have. As long as we're in these bodies, we're going to have an ego self also. As much as we want to always embody these higher self aspects, the ego is in us as humans as a coping mechanism to help us navigate through life. So the ego's main job is to seek pleasure and to avoid pain. So acting out of that ego self is often going to be coming from a place of fear or coming from a place of seeking maybe sense pleasures or things that are not as authentically us to meet a need. So that's our lower self. Our lower self is afraid of stepping into that full version of the higher self. The ego self does keep us stuck. All of us have this ego, and that ego is there to protect us from feeling shame around a lot of different things. The ego's there to protect us from getting hurt, but it also prevents us from really being our most authentic version. And so it's important that we do know how to manage what is coming from the ego and managing our own emotional state and our own sense of vulnerability. So the ego self can be thought of as this part of us that always has to prove something. It has this quality to it that is this proving energy where, you know, it's always trying to prove that we are competent enough, that we're smart enough, that we're lovable enough, that we are this or that enough, right? And it could be anything. And we all have a wide range of different experiences in life and, what our ego has formed to believe that it has to protect ourselves from. But nevertheless, it's going to be there trying to prove us when our higher self knows there's nothing to prove, that we are these beautiful divine beings with our own unique harmonic signature and knows our innate value. So maybe right now you could just take some time to reflect. And you might even want to pause the video to reflect on this, but just maybe getting a journal out and listing some ways in which you don't feel enough. Where in your life are you feeling like you don't quite measure up or that you're not good enough? Is there a place where you don't feel capable enough to do a certain job, or you don't feel lovable enough to be in the relationship you want to be in, or you don't feel worthy enough to uh, receive gifts, or you don't feel capable enough to compete in maybe like a sports event or something like that? So really just take some time to tune in with yourself and figure out, where do I feel like I'm not enough? Where do I feel like I'm falling short? Getting this together, while it's the part that we want to transcend, but having the conscious awareness on that is going to help us shift that later on. And by writing this stuff out, we already start to begin to loosen the ego's hold on us just by adding that awareness. And the ego wants to come in and prove all of these things, but then it tries to really hustle for our worthiness. And that's our ego in action. So, first, we're going to go into how do we know if we're acting out of our ego self? And that's going to help us build those building blocks of awareness that we're trying to build here. So we know we're acting out of ego when we're trying to prove anything. We're trying to prove that we are worthy of being part of a certain group of people. We're trying to prove that we are good enough to do our own thing in life or in business, or we're trying to prove that we're better than someone, right? That's ego self, that's our lower self. If we're trying to protect something, so that's another characteristic of ego is this sense or need to protect and to be fearful that we're going to lose something or that we have to really guard ourselves or protect ourselves or not really. This can also look like not opening up. Like we need to protect what is really inside of us because we feel like we're going to get ostracized in some way for being ourselves, or we try to protect our job, or we try to protect our stance on something. So it can be any number of things. But anytime that we're in that mode of actively protecting something, we can know that's not coming really from our highest self. That's coming from a place of fear. It's coming from a place of ego. The next indication that we're really living in our lower self or our ego self is perfectionism. If we see things as that we have to be perfect, that's again going back to, we're either trying to be perfect because we want to prove that perfection, to prove that we're better than someone else, or that we are trying to protect ourselves from the consequences of not being perfect, and more so than the actual consequences that the world would give us is inside of ourselves. It's like this need to be perfect inside, and what are we going to think of us if we're not perfect? People pleasing is the other way that we know we're acting out of that ego self, because people pleasing comes from fear also. It comes from shame, feeling not good enough, feeling like we have to be a certain way or fit in a certain box to be really loved and accepted by others. So, really, anytime fear is in the picture and we're operating through that sense of fear, that's our lower ego self. Another reason why people pleasing is so much from the lower ego self is just simply because we're trying to control how other people see us or think about us whenever we're in that people pleasing mode. And in that process, we truly abandon that higher self version of us, because that higher self version of us is rooted in love. And this is a good point to really talk about this, how in life we, at every single moment, every single thing that we do, every single decision we make, we're either moving closer to love or closer to fear. that can apply to absolutely everything in life. So that's a really good gauge. And now that we went over the characteristics of this lower ego self, knowing that these are all rooted in fear, now we kind of know that the direction we're heading for the higher self characteristics are rooted in love. So, how do we know if we're acting out of our most authentic self, our higher self? How are we knowing we're aligned with that? And the first thing about our higher self is our higher self is very creative. So, the part of you that has creative tendencies, that's coming from your highest aspect. The higher self loves to create. So this could be artwork. This could be something for business. This could be creating a life, creating the way that you want a certain room in your house to be. But it's a creative characteristic that the higher self has. It's expanding, and that's what life always is wanting to do is expand. That's what life does. It's this huge expansion process. Think about how much you have created in your life, even in the last few years. You've expanded so much as a being. You've the world has given you things that you might not like so much, but then that shows you more what you do want to create with your time and energy and money and resources, right? So to really get into this creative energy of the higher self, you might do some meditation or do some journaling and really just ponder what could I do that is going to be really meaningful to me? And it doesn't have to be meaningful for anyone else other than you. So if you can create something that is valuable to you, that's really all that matters. But bonus points if in this quest of creation, you are able to create something that others benefit from, then that's wonderful. But what is really meaningful to you? What really intrigues you that makes you want to build or create in some way? That's a higher self characteristic. Um, the higher self is also, instead of taking, the lower self is more about fear and let's take everything that we can get, um, because there might not be enough. Whereas the higher self really wants to give. So there's going to be this element of contribution that comes from the higher self. How do you contribute in your life around you? You can be a contributor to making your home life better, making your work life better, making the world better. How can you contribute to the world by using your gifts and your specialties and knowledge to help others? How can you contribute respect, kindness, love, gifts, talents, abilities? And this is from a whole different energy of contributing something just for the sake of proving yourself or proving yourself worthy. This higher self contribution is in a whole different energy and it's just for the joy of contributing. The next thing that is a characteristic of the higher self is the connection that we create. The higher self loves to feel connected there, and it's this genuine connection. It's the type of connection that doesn't need validation, but rather connects just because it feels good and it feels aligned. So it goes far beyond that connection just to prove something, but genuinely wanting to connect with others, showing up as your most authentic self, connecting with people over the truth of who you are versus connecting over some facade or persona or trauma, right? So the true higher self embraces its weirdness. There might be people that make fun of you for being yourself, but those are not the people that really have even earned the right to be in your energy and connect with you. When you are fully yourself and you're fully authentic, you make connections on deeper levels that really serves to communicate in your life in much deeper ways and in much energetically clear ways. It's not so muddled. It's not so divided. It's like this connection that has really clear energy. So think about the connections in your life. If there was a cord between you and that other person, is that connection clear? Is there an equal or pretty equal amount of energy flowing to and from you and the other person in really clear ways? And you intuitively already know that, right? Like you can just feel it. Um, and in those circumstances where that connection is muddled, really think about, is this connection rooted in fear or trying to prove something or trying to, be good enough? Or is it based in fear of what's going to happen if you don't connect? Or is it from that joy of connecting? The higher self also loves to grow and to build, to cultivate things. So it's like, you might cultivate a beautiful garden and grow all of these wonderful fruits and vegetables, but you've spent so much time and put so much love into nurturing the garden. But that could be anything, right? Maybe you are passionate about, I had a client who loved refinishing skateboards and just really cultivated just top of the line, beautiful skateboards that he would buy and refinish. That's a cultivating thing from his higher self, right? Because it was for the love of doing it. And it was in that energy of deep care, So whatever you cultivate from your higher self is naturally going to make the world a better place because it's going to hold a higher vibration. It's really going to serve to inspire people in really deep ways. And it's also going to fill you up energetically in a good, satiating way. Just like in the same way that after you eat a really delicious and nutritious meal, you're going to feel really calm and satiated. The same goes for acting through your higher self. You're going to feel filled up. You're going to feel this just ease and flow and buzzing of energy. through your energy field. So when we're functioning from the higher self, there's this natural flow of energy that's within us. More energy is available to us than if we're not. When we aren't seeking out approval from others, when we aren't getting permission slips to live our life or trying to prove things, because all that stuff takes up so much energetic bandwidth and energy. It burns energy. So when we're living authentically, there's naturally more energy that's available to us and to our being to flow in that state of alignment, to create, to connect, to cultivate. So we can know that our higher self has much clearer and cleaner energy. Our higher self is absolutely certain. It's not clouded or distorted or murked up. It's very, very clear. And so if you're feeling a lot of that distortion energy, if you're feeling really muddled up, if you're feeling like you are always trying to prove yourself or compete with people or be better than people, yeah, you're probably operating from those lower aspects, and that's okay. This is no judgment at all. This is just to help you recognize so you can move yourself through and out of that because you absolutely can. All of these different levels that we can possibly be at hold energetic frequencies. Operating from the ego is a more distorted place. Operating from our authenticity is very bright. The lower self is more slow vibrating, dense energetic patterns. The higher self is more clean, clear waves instead of dense particles. So just getting kind of a image of that can help you understand because it's something we know when we're in that higher self energy. One of the ways to really, really tune into this is just be the observer of how we communicate in life. Communication, how people communicate, tells us so much about that person. Our communication shows us so much about whether we're operating from the lower self or the higher self. Because if we really want to shift this and live more in our highest authentic self, then we can notice in our communication if we're trying to get approval, if we're over apologizing, if we're trying to manipulate people or trying to control how other people either act or how other people perceive us. That's a good sign that we're in the lower self. Or are we communicating because we really love it? Are we communicating because it's fun, because it's freeing, because we're deeply heard and understood? So it can also show us like who we need to be around, like who's healthy for us to be around. There's a lot of people that, yeah, they might be really nice people, but they have a lot of unhealed aspects that you can just feel that when you're talking to them, and maybe they're not at the place right now in their life to really enrich your journey at this time. So it's always not a bad thing if you need to let people go that are not really quite there yet of living in their authenticity, but you don't want them muddying up your energy or your connection. One of my favorite Buddhist teachers, Jack Kornfield, he always in his Dharma talks will bring up this quote, and I can't even remember who the quote was from, but talking about saving the world, like you don't save the world because you feel like you have to. Save it because you love it and because you love whatever cause you are behind, because that's going to have such a stronger frequency. It's going to have so much more charge, and you're going to get so much more momentum doing something because you love it rather than because you feel like you have to. Who are you as your authentic higher self? This is another point where you might want to do some reflection or do some journaling. What would that be like if you really were living from your higher self aspects so much of the time? What would that authentic higher self be like? And really get into this. What would your higher self look like? How would your higher self carry themselves? How would your higher self spend the day? How would your higher self approach the things that are in your life? Who would your higher self associate with? These are all things that are going to give you so much insight because you already are your higher self. It's really about clearing away everything that is the not self and aligning with those higher aspects that really are already there. They already live within you. And also reflect, where have you noticed yourself protecting, enforcing, performing for others, trying to one up others, trying to make something that's bigger and better than for the sake of beating others out. It's different if you're building from that sense of love. The heart chakra's frequency is so freaking powerful, and it's way more powerful than the mind, and especially the ego mind, right? It all comes down to an energetic flow state. So much of this comes just from how deeply we actually trust ourselves, and do we actually feel secure in who we are, in all of it? And if not, no shame. Again, it's something to work on, something to build awareness around. It's something to notice, right? Because once we have the consciousness to recognize what's going on, then we can have a chance at shifting it. If it's going on completely unconsciously, how are we going to shift it? Because we don't even know what to shift. The ego is more prominent when we don't trust ourselves. And a lot of us were brought up to really not trust ourselves. We have a culture that encourages us not to trust ourselves. But the more that we build that trust within, and maybe this is something that you want to set up some sessions for you and I to do together, or maybe you have some other type of therapist or someone else that you really trust that can help you to build that trust within yourself. But the highest version of us attracts a whole different set of circumstances to us, and our life looks completely different. when we trust ourselves more, we'll show up as our highest self version much, much more. So, and this is an easy one to listen to and take in all of this information and then start beating yourself up. So I want to give that word of caution. Don't use this information to make yourself wrong or bad or stupid, because that's not going to help us. That's ego again. That's what we're shifting away from. So bring love to this awareness. Be aware of it, see what's going on, but love yourself, because this all really was accumulated throughout life as you began running certain programs, or certain programs were transferred on to you from your parents or early caregivers. So it's absolutely nothing to be ashamed about, just to have awareness around. And if you want some help with this, if you're really ready to start shifting this, and you want to make sure that you're not working out of ego and you want some support as you're moving more into your higher self version, definitely reach out. Go to my website, djtwellness.com, fill out a contact form, book a free strategy appointment, and let's work together. Let's really dig in and make your world a better place. You're so worth that. So, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your presence. And as always, feel free to share this video with anyone who you know in your circle that would really benefit from knowing and applying this info. Feel free to subscribe to the channel. It helps us get this work out to more souls that really need it. And like the video, let me know in the comment section how your own journey has been. What is really challenging for you? What have you found to be so freeing? Where are you at with this? So thank you so much. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon. Bye.